Known as Jukai, meaning Sea of Trees, Aokigahara Forest is located at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan, and has been there since the dried lava formed after Mount Fuji's eruption in 864. The unusual structure of the twisted roots and denseness of the trees is thought to be attributed to its unusual volcanic base, and since the trees stay green all year round, a stunning scene is created at the foot of the mountain. Add the fact that very little wildlife lives there, making the forest very still, apart from the occasional tweets of birds, and it's easy to see why Aokigahara is a magnet for tourism and paranormal enthusiasts, who believe the forest is one of the most haunted locations on the planet. Although, unfortunately, the main reason many visit this forest is not for its appearance or the 2 caves that can be found there, but because it's the number 2 spot in the world and number 1 spot in Japan to commit suicide. And this is apparent as at the forest entrance there are signs encouraging people with suicidal thoughts to think about their parents, siblings and children, urging them to talk about their troubles and offering a suicidal prevention number to dial. But for most travellers, the signs go unnoticed as their intentions are to simply walk through the forest and explore its unusual beauty by sticking to the marked trails. For those who decide to venture away from the paths to explore, often mark their way back with coloured tape, which is also used by those who go into the forest to commit suicide, but are not sure if they want to go ahead with it. Either way, Azusa Hayano, a geologist who has been studying the forest for the last 3 decades, said in a Vice interview, if you follow the tape, you will most likely find something at the end of it. Whether that be the belongings of someone who has camped out and contemplated taking their life, but returned home, or the body of someone who has had no hesitation. Such is the frequency of deaths here that authorities do regular sweeps of the area to collect bodies, and it's thought as many as 2 a week commit suicide there, usually by hanging, second to taking an overdose on sleeping tablets. Although official figures are no longer available and the exact number could never be confirmed, as some bodies are not found until many years later deep within the forest. But who is travelling here just to commit suicide and why? Well, most of them are Japanese businessmen between the ages of 40 and 50, and with March being the month with the greatest number of suicides each year, the month at which the financial year ends, the realisation the businessmen are struggling financially seems to be the main reason for their suicide, most of which travel great distances to this specific forest. But why Aokigahara in particular? Well, there are a couple of reasons. In 1960, the acclaimed Japanese author Saiko Matsumoto wrote a novel called Black Sea of Trees. The story ends with 2 lovers committing suicide in Aokigahara Forest, and it's believed his work was so influential that it attributed to people travelling to the forest to copy the suicide in the book. Another controversial book was published in 1993 called The Complete Suicide Manual, and it actually recommends Aokigahara as the perfect place to hang yourself. Now, there are people who discredit this theory for some reason, but since both books have been found with the belongings of a few people in the forest, it goes without saying it had some impact on their decision to take their lives. However, in Japanese culture, there is a long history of suicide, not as an escape from the modern stresses of life, but as an honourable act by samurai, in a ritual called harakiri. We are all well aware of the Japanese kamikaze pilots in World War II, as they were considered brave in their country, as death was perceived as more noble than defeat or capture. But although Aokigahara Forest has been heavily associated with suicides in the last few decades, it's always had a long history of death. As far back as the early 19th century, it's said that the Japanese people used the forest to abandon elderly, infirmed family members during the periods of famine, carrying them into the forest and leaving them there to die of starvation. With all this death, is it really surprising to hear that it's said to be one of the most, if not the most haunted forests in the world? It's often been reported that white spirits have been seen gliding around, and Japanese spiritualists believe the soil and trees are tainted by the corpses of the dead. In Japanese folklore, they believe that yuri, figures that are the result of someone dying an unnatural or violent death, haunt the forest, and encourage visitors to stray from the path and provoke suicidal people to carry out their own deaths. You can see why many say Aokigahara is one of the most haunted and scariest places in the world, and this is compounded by the fact that compasses, GPS systems and mobile phones will malfunction deep in the forest due to magnetic iron found in the volcanic soil, so for those who get lost, it can be near impossible to get out. But the forest's reputation doesn't just rub off on travellers looking to capture some paranormal activity. The forest has a big impact on the locals and the workers, who often hear screams coming from within that they link to tormented spirits, and feel the natural beauty, uniqueness, and the serenity of the area is sullied by so many suicides and the supposed paranormal activity. As well as doing regular work on the forest, they are now often tasked with removing bodies after they have been discovered by police, where they will store them in a special room in the village used to house suicide corpses. However, they may be a solution to the suicide problem, although not one the locals would want. Scientists have recently predicted that just as natural processes formed the forest, natural processes may wipe it out, as it's likely that Mount Fuji will erupt sometime in the next few years based on the high level of pressure measured in Fuji's magma chambers, along with the rising water level of Saiko. If the scientists are to be believed, in a few years the trees at Aokigahara will be no more. However, that cannot be said for the people who took their lives there, as their memories will forever live on. I'm not going to say I hope you've enjoyed this video, because this isn't exactly something you can sit down and enjoy as such. But what I do hope is that perhaps this video has made you realise if you or anyone you may know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, then it simply does not need to end this way. I've said it many times before, your life is so precious, and we all go through rough times, some a lot more than others, and things may seem tough at the minute, but if you work on it, they can and will get better.